So let me ask you this. Why is it that no matter how hard you work, your bank account never seems to grow? I used to feel the exact same way, constantly hustling but wondering why I was still stuck financially. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. In this video, I'm breaking down the 7 biggest money traps keeping people broke in 2025 and, more importantly, how you can avoid them. By the end, you'll know the exact mistakes to stop making so you can finally start building real financial growth. Lifestyle inflation is one of the most common traps that silently keeps people broke even as they begin to make more money. The problem lies in the fact that as income grows, spending often grows at the same pace or even faster. Instead of using the extra income to invest, save, or pay off debt, people start rewarding themselves with nicer cars, bigger homes, expensive vacations, or the latest gadgets. It feels justified. After all, you're earning more, so why not enjoy the benefits? But the truth is, when your spending habits expand to match your income, you never actually build wealth. You just live in a slightly upgraded version of the same paycheck to paycheck cycle, and eventually, this lifestyle creep makes it nearly impossible to break free. The solution is to consciously create a gap between your income and your expenses, regardless of how much money you make. Instead of upgrading your lifestyle, every time you get a raise or promotion, lock in a portion of that increase for your future. For example, if you get a 10% raise, commit to investing or saving at least half of that extra income while keeping your living expenses the same. Over time, that gap compounds into real financial freedom. By automating investments or transfers into a high-yield savings account, you remove the temptation to spend and make it effortless to live below your means. The key is to make the decision before the money ever touches your checking account. Otherwise, it will disappear into everyday spending without you even noticing. A practical example of this would be someone earning $50,000 a year who gets a raise to $60,000. Most people immediately upgrade their apartment, finance a new car, and start eating out more often. That $10,000 increase gets absorbed instantly, and their financial situation doesn't improve. On the other hand, someone who decides to keep their lifestyle the same at $50,000 and automatically invests $5,000 of that raise into an index fund while saving another $2,000 cash will see a completely different outcome. In just 1 year, they've set aside $700,000 without feeling like they're depriving themselves. And if they keep that up for 10 years with compound growth, it turns into a 6-figure difference. Another example can be seen with small, everyday habits. Imagine you used to make coffee at home, but now you're earning more. So you start buying a $6 latte every morning on the way to work. That doesn't seem like much on the surface, but over a year, that's over $20,000 gone on something you didn't need before. Pair that with upgraded streaming services, nicer clothes every season, and the newest phone every year, and suddenly your raise has evaporated. Meanwhile, someone else at your same income level who sticks to their original spending habits and invests that $2,000 annually could have tens of thousands of dollars in the market after a decade. The trap with lifestyle inflation is that it sneaks up on you because it feels so natural. Social media makes it worse by showing you constant upgrades in other people's lives, and you start to believe you deserve the same. But wealth isn't built by keeping up with others. It's built by consistently spending less than you earn and letting the difference grow. Even if you never increase your income dramatically, resisting lifestyle inflation ensures that every raise and bonus moves you closer to freedom instead of just giving you temporary comfort. The discipline to separate wants from needs and to consciously direct extra income toward your future is what separates people who remain stuck from those who achieve financial independence. High interest debt is one of the most destructive traps that keeps people broke because it drains wealth faster than almost any other financial mistake. The problem is that when you carry balances on credit cards, payday loans, or other high-interest debt, the interest compounds against you every single month. Unlike investments that work for you and grow over time, debt works in the opposite direction, constantly pulling you backward, no matter how much effort you put in to get ahead. Many people underestimate the weight of this because the minimum payments seem manageable. But in reality, making only the minimum means you're mostly paying interest and barely touching the principal. This creates a cycle where you feel like you're making progress, but the balance barely moves, trapping you for years. The solution is to make paying off high-interest debt your #1 financial priority. Before investing, before upgrading your lifestyle, and even before focusing on long-term goals, tackling these debts frees up your cash flow and stops money from bleeding away every month. The most effective strategies are either the avalanche method, where you pay off the highest interest rate debt first while making minimum payments on the rest, or the snowball method, where you start with the smallest balances to build momentum. Both approaches work, but the key is consistency and discipline. Another powerful tactic is to avoid adding more debt while you're paying down what you already owe. That might mean cutting expenses, selling unused items, or temporarily picking up extra income to throw as much money as possible at the debt until it's gone. For example, imagine someone has $8,000 in credit card debt with a 20% interest rate. If they make only the minimum payment of around $200 per month, it could take them over a decade to pay it off, and they'll end up spending thousands of dollars just in interest. But if that same person cuts unnecessary expenses, takes an extra shift on weekends, and puts $600 a month toward the balance instead, They could pay it off in just over a year and save nearly all of that wasted interest. The difference isn't just financial, it's psychological. Once the debt is gone, they free up $600 a month in cash flow that can now be redirected into investments, savings, or building an emergency fund. A real-world example of how damaging high-interest debt can be is seen with payday loans. These loans might seem like a short-term fix, but with annual interest rates often exceeding 300%, they become impossible to escape. Someone who borrows $500 might owe $650 just a few weeks later, and if they can't pay it off, they roll the balance into a new loan. Before long, they're paying back double or triple the amount they originally borrowed, yet their financial situation hasn't improved. Compare that to someone who avoids payday loans altogether and instead builds a small emergency fund of $1,000 to cover unexpected expenses. When their car breaks down, they use their own cash rather than taking on predatory debt. That one decision saves them from years of financial strain. The trap of high-interest debt is that it feels like a quick solution in the moment, but it becomes an anchor that weighs down your future. Every dollar going to interest is a dollar not building your wealth. Breaking free requires both short-term sacrifice and long-term discipline. But the reward is the ability to keep more of what you earn and redirect it toward building assets rather than paying creditors. By recognizing how expensive and damaging high-interest debt truly is and committing to eliminating it as quickly as possible, you create a foundation where your money finally starts working for you instead of against you. Neglecting investments is another trap that quietly keeps people broke because it robs them of the one resource they can never get back: time. The problem isn't just that people fail to invest, it's that they delay it for years under the assumption they'll start once they're making enough money or when life feels more stable. But waiting comes at a huge cost because the earlier you start investing, the more compound growth works in your favor. Compound interest is often called the eighth wonder of the world for a reason. It's the snowball effect that allows small, consistent contributions to grow into massive amounts over time. When you neglect investing, you miss out on years of growth, and eventually you find yourself trying to play catch up later in life when it's much harder to build the same level of wealth. The solution is to start investing as early as possible, even if the amount seems insignificant. The idea is to develop the habit of putting money to work rather than letting it sit idle. Instead of waiting until you feel financially ready, automate small contributions into a retirement account, index fund, or other simple investment vehicle. Even $50 or $100 a month can make a meaningful difference if it's consistent and starts early. The beauty of compounding is that the time your money spends in the market matters far more than your ability to perfectly time it. By removing emotion from the process and making investments automatic, you give yourself the chance to build wealth quietly in the background while your day-to-day life continues. For example, let's say two people each invest $2 a month. The first person starts at age 25 and invests for 10 years, then stops contributing entirely but leaves their money in the market. The second person waits until age 35 to start investing, but then contributes the same $200 a month all the way until age 65, assuming an average annual return of 7%. The first person ends up with more money at age 65 than the second person, even though they contributed far less overall. Why? Because the first person gave their money 40 years to grow, while the second person only gave it 30 years. This shows how powerful time is in the equation and how delaying even a decade can dramatically reduce your financial outcome. Another real-world example is someone who only keeps their savings in a regular bank account. Let's say they put away $10,000 and leave it untouched for 20 years in a savings account earning 0.5% interest. At the end of that period, their balance is around $11,000. Now compare that to someone who puts the same $10,000 into a low-cost index fund averaging 7% annual returns. After 20 years, their balance grows to nearly $39,000. Both people saved the same amount, but one ended up with nearly 4 times as much simply because they chose to invest rather than let inflation eat away at their money in a savings account. The trap of neglecting investments often comes from fear, lack of knowledge, or simply procrastination. People worry about losing money in the market, so they choose the false safety of keeping cash on the sidelines. But over the long run, inflation guarantees that money left uninvested loses value. Others get caught up in thinking they need to learn everything before they begin, when in reality, starting small with simple, proven strategies like index funds is enough to get the ball rolling. The mindset shift required is to see investing not as a gamble, but as a long-term tool for financial freedom. By consistently putting even small amounts into investments and letting compound growth do its work, you avoid the trap of standing still financially while others quietly build wealth all around you. Impulse spending and consumer traps are one of the easiest ways people sabotage their finances without even realizing it. The problem comes from how effortlessly money can slip away on things that feel small in the moment but add up over time. With one-click purchases, constant sales, subscriptions, and marketing designed to trigger emotion, spending becomes more about instant gratification than actual need. The trap is that these purchases rarely add long-term value to your life, but they consistently drain your bank account, leaving less money for savings, investments, or debt payoff. Many people convince themselves that 10 here or 20 are there doesn't matter, yet at the end of the month, they wonder where all their money went. When multiplied across years, these habits can literally cost someone hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost potential wealth. The solution is to build intentional spending habits and systems that protect you from making emotional financial decisions. One effective strategy is the 24-hour rule, where you delay any non-essential purchase for at least a day before deciding if you really want it. Another approach is tracking every recurring subscription or expense and asking if it still provides enough value to justify the cost. Automating your savings and investments before you have a chance to spend also flips the equation. You pay yourself first, and whatever is left is what you can freely use without guilt. Even setting clear spending categories, like allocating a small percentage of your income toward fun money, creates boundaries that let you enjoy life without overspending. The key is that these systems help you avoid impulsive decisions in the moment when your emotions are strongest. For example, imagine someone spends $50 a week on takeout lunches because it's convenient. That's $200 a month or $2,400 a year. Over a decade, that small impulse adds up to $24,000, money that could have been invested and grown significantly. Now consider someone who decides to meal prep 4 days a week and only allow themselves one takeout meal as a treat. They cut that expense down to $40 a month, saving $160 each month. If they invest that $160 into a simple index fund earning 7% annually in 20 years, they could have over $80,000. The difference between being on autopilot with impulse spending and being intentional is staggering. Another example is subscription creep. It often starts with one or two services, maybe Netflix and Spotify. Over time, people add more Amazon Prime, Hulu, Disney Plus gym memberships, premium apps, and monthly boxes. Before long, they're paying $200 a month for services they hardly use or even forgot they signed up for. That's $2,400 a year going to companies instead of building personal wealth. Someone who regularly audits their subscriptions and cancels the ones they don't need could redirect that money into a Roth IRA or brokerage account. After 30 years of investing $200 a month, they'd end up with nearly $250,000 just by cutting out things that added little value to their life. Impulse spending traps also show up in larger decisions, like financing a car you don't need because of an emotional attachment to status. The difference between driving a reliable, $15,000 used car versus leasing a $42,000 new car every few years can mean the loss of hundreds of dollars each month. Over a decade, that's tens of thousands of dollars gone, not including the opportunity cost of not investing that money. While it feels exciting in the moment, the long-term consequences keep people in financial chains while others quietly build their future. The core issue is that consumer culture is designed to separate you from your money. Marketing taps into emotions like fear of missing out, status, and instant pleasure. Without intentional systems in place, it's almost impossible not to get caught up in it. But by creating habits like delaying purchases, tracking expenses, setting boundaries, and automating your savings, you regain control. Small adjustments in how you handle daily spending don't just save you money now, they multiply into financial security later. Lack of an emergency fund is another trap that keeps people broke because it leaves them vulnerable to every unexpected expense life throws their way. The problem isn't just the financial stress of a sudden bill, it's the ripple effect it creates. Without a cushion of savings, even small emergencies force people into debt, usually high-interest credit cards or loans. A $500 car repair or a medical bill that comes out of nowhere can derail months of progress, sending you right back to square one. When emergencies happen, and they always do, having no safety net makes the situation far worse than it needs to be. Many people underestimate this until it happens to them, and then they realize they're stuck in a cycle of paying off debt from the last crisis while being unprepared for the next one. The solution is to prioritize building an emergency fund before focusing heavily on investing or lifestyle upgrades. This doesn't mean you need tens of thousands of dollars immediately, but rather starting small and working toward a realistic goal. The first step might be $500 or $1,000 set aside for the most common minor emergencies. Once that's established, the long-term goal is typically 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved in a separate, easily accessible account. This fund acts as a financial buffer that keeps you from panicking every time life throws a curveball. The peace of mind it provides is almost as valuable as the money itself, because you know you can handle the unexpected without going into debt. A practical example would be someone living paycheck to paycheck who suddenly has their car break down, requiring $1,000 or $200 in repairs. Without an emergency fund, they put the bill on a credit card with a 20% interest rate. Over the next year, if they only make minimum payments, that further $200 grows into nearly $4,500 or more with interest, all while they struggle to pay it down. On the other hand, imagine the same person with even a modest $500 emergency fund set aside. They can pay for the repair immediately, avoid debt altogether, and then rebuild the fund over time. Instead of spiraling into financial stress, they stay on track and protect their future goals. Another example is medical bills, which are one of the most common reasons people fall into debt. A trip to the emergency room or an unexpected dental procedure can cost thousands. Someone without an emergency fund might have no choice but to take on a personal loan or use a credit card, which then becomes a long-term burden. Compare that with someone who has even 3 months of expenses saved. They can pay the bill outright, continue their normal monthly obligations without interruption, and recover without sacrificing their financial stability. That one preparation step separates people who stay stuck in debt from those who remain financially secure. Even smaller examples prove how critical an emergency fund is. A broken phone, home appliance repairs, or sudden travel expenses for family emergencies can all derail a budget if there's no backup cash. People often don't think of these as emergencies, but they are exactly the kinds of expenses that creep up and cause unnecessary stress. With savings set aside, these events are inconveniences instead of disasters. The difference is whether you planned for the inevitable or hoped it would never happen. The trap of not having an emergency fund is that it creates a fragile financial life where any disruption can collapse the progress you've made. It forces you into high-interest debt, keeps you stressed, and makes it nearly impossible to focus on building long-term wealth. By creating even a modest fund, you give yourself breathing room and protection against the unexpected. This foundation allows every other part of your financial life, investing, saving, paying off debt, to happen without being constantly interrupted by crises. Ignoring financial education is one of the most damaging traps because it guarantees you'll repeat the same mistakes over and over again without even realizing why. The problem is that money touches every part of life, yet most people were never formally taught how to manage it. Schools rarely cover practical financial skills like budgeting, investing, taxes, or credit, so people grow up learning through trial and error. Without proper knowledge, they fall into traps like taking on high-interest debt, avoiding investments out of fear, or trusting the wrong advice from friends, influencers, or even financial institutions that profit from their ignorance. Over time, the cost of this lack of education compounds. Missed opportunities, unnecessary fees, debt cycles, and lost years of growth add up to a lifetime of financial struggle. The solution is to commit to ongoing financial education, no matter where you are starting from. Knowledge is the foundation that empowers you to make better decisions with your money. This doesn't require advanced degrees or complicated strategies. It simply means making a habit of learning the basics of personal finance and gradually building from there. Reading books on money management, following trusted financial educators, watching videos that explain investing in simple terms, and even taking free online courses are all ways to get started. The goal isn't to know everything, but to understand enough to make informed decisions and avoid the traps designed to keep people broke. By learning consistently, you shift from being reactive with money to proactive, and that shift alone changes everything. For example, consider someone who never learned about credit cards. They might assume paying the minimum balance is enough and end up carrying thousands in high-interest debt for years. That one misunderstanding costs them tens of thousands of dollars in unnecessary interest. Compare that to someone who takes just a few hours to understand how credit works. They learn to pay the balance in full each month, maintain a high credit score, and qualify for better loan rates on big purchases like a car or home. The difference in lifetime cost between these two people is enormous, all because one invested a little time in financial education while the other ignored it. Another powerful example comes from investing. Someone who doesn't understand the basics of compound interest might delay investing until their 40s, thinking they'll catch up later. But by waiting, they lose decades of potential growth, making it nearly impossible to reach the same financial outcomes as someone who started in their 20s. Let's say two people each invest $200 a month at an average return of 7%. The person who starts at 25 will have over $500,000 by age 65. The person who waits until 40 will only have around $200,000 by the same age, even though they invested the same amount monthly. That gap of $300 is the price of financial ignorance. By learning how compound growth works, someone could avoid this costly mistake and start building wealth early. Even small examples highlight the importance of financial knowledge. Someone who doesn't know how to budget might overspend every month without realizing where their money goes, constantly feeling broke despite earning a decent income. Once they learn to track expenses, set limits, and prioritize saving, they gain control and stop living paycheck to paycheck. Another person who never learned about tax deductions might pay thousands more each year than necessary, while someone with basic tax knowledge keeps that money and puts it toward investments. These aren't complicated strategies. They're simple lessons anyone can learn with a little effort. The trap of ignoring financial education is that it creates a cycle of mistakes and missed opportunities that quietly erode wealth over time. People convince themselves that money is too complicated or boring, but in reality, learning just the fundamentals can transform their financial trajectory. By investing time in education, you protect yourself from debt traps, grow your wealth with confidence, and make decisions that serve your long-term goals instead of someone else's profits. The more you learn, the more you realize that financial independence isn't reserved for the lucky or the wealthy. It's available to anyone willing to educate themselves and put that knowledge into action. So, quick recap. We've gone through the 7 biggest money traps keeping people broke in 2025: lifestyle, inflation, high interest debt, neglecting investments, impulse spending, lack of an emergency fund, ignoring financial education, and one more: falling for get-rich-quick schemes instead of focusing on long-term growth. If you can avoid these traps and apply even a few of the solutions we talked about today, you'll already be way ahead of most people financially. Now, if you found this valuable, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a comment below telling me which of these traps you've personally struggled with, because I read every single one. And stick around, because in the next video, we're diving into exactly where to put your money in 2025. Whether you're just getting started or looking to maximize your investments, you definitely don't want to miss it.